Hello, this is Steve Helwick here breaking down all things college football. I've done a couple of these videos in the past, one for midweek action this year, and this year for bowl season I just wanted to experiment and upload some of these videos to YouTube breaking down bowl recaps and previewing some of the upcoming bowl games. It is truly the most wonderful time of the year in college football. We have 41 bowl games on the slate plus the college football playoff final, which just gives us a ton of football in December and January, and we had two excellent games to start the season today, which is Friday, December 16th, and that was the Bahamas Bowl and the Cure Bowl. So I would like to start by breaking those games down. In the Bahamas Bowl, we had the UAB Blazers and the Miami Redhawks, and this game on paper didn't seem to be the best matchup with UAB entering as 10 to 11 point favorites. But the Blazers, coached by Bryant Vincent, an interim coach coaching his last game before Trent Dilfer took over with the program, did an excellent job of establishing UAB's offense out of the gate. And he got UAB up in this game 10-0, but it wasn't the story of UAB's offense which defined the game. Rather, it was a defensive play that they made at the end of the game when their linebacker Raynard Ellis stopped Jalen Walker 2 yards short of the goal line in a finish reminiscent of Super Bowl 34, the Rams-Titans Kevin Dyson finish. That was the comparison everyone made, and it was very similar to it. This Bahamas Bowl was really thrilling game, and Miami had a great possession at the end of the game that put themselves in position to possibly win and upset UAB after trailing for the majority of the contest. So Avion Smith, the backup quarterback who had started 8 games previously this year in relief of Brett Gabbert, he matriculated this team down the field on that final drive. They went 2 for 2 on critical fourth down situations, and then Smith late in the game runs out of bounds, and there's a face mask penalty that moves Miami to the UAB 15-yard line. Smith completes a pass to Jalen Walker, and Walker, he looks like he might have a chance at the end zone, but there's a couple lines of defense that UAB has prohibiting Walker from getting the goal line. One of them was the linebacker Raynard Ellis, who made the wrap up to initiate the tackle, and then their cornerback Starling Thomas V put on the finishing blow to help UAB win 24-20. I want to break down a few things in this game that we saw. One of them was UAB's offense. One thing that was very defiant of the Bryant Vincent era of him calling plays, him running the offense the past few years, was UAB is usually a running team, but when they pass, they like to take home run shots. Now, UAB operated without the nation's leading rusher in Dwayne McBride today. Dwayne McBride had over 1,700 rushing yards in 11 games this season. Probably should have been a Doak Walker finalist for the work he put in just running the ball, and he had a tremendous average, only had one game under 100 yards all season. So McBride was out, so you knew that the offense would have a little different workarounds in this game. So UAB really made a statement on the first play from scrimmage when their quarterback Dylan Hopkins launched a 46-yard deep ball in the direction of Trey Shropshire, and Trey Shropshire was fantastic throughout the game. He won offensive MVP honors with 183 receiving yards. Right after he got that 46-yard touchdown, ran a perfect corner route into the end zone, and UAB scored a touchdown. Made a few more deep ball catches and man coverage throughout the game, and that was a theme, was UAB was getting Shropshire on islands, and he was delivering these one-on-one catches throughout the contest. So Miami's secondary definitely could have done a better job at containing Trey Shropshire. It's kind of a tongue twister of a name. But Miami's strength had always been the run defense, but because that UAB was so successful in the passing game, Miami's defense had more to watch out for, and Jermaine Brown Jr. did a really good job of filling in that role for Dwayne McBride with 116 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns in the victory. Jermaine Brown Jr. did have the go-ahead touchdown to make it 24-20. It was a 4th-and-1 play with about a minute and 40 seconds to a minute and 30 seconds remaining. And UAB had no timeouts. They were down 3. This was a gamble from the 12-yard line. Bryant Vincent, this was his final game as a coach. He wanted to go out a winner, didn't want to play for overtime in the tie. Goes for a 4th-and-1. And the sea just parts. I know UAB, they have some All-CUSA talent on that offensive line. The sea just parted for Jermaine Brown Jr. Ran straight up the middle for a 12-yard touchdown to give UAB the lead. So I thought UAB's offense did a really good job of staying balanced in this game when throughout the season it had been mainly a rushing offense. So a lot of credit for Vincent and his preparation for this game. Miami, their offense didn't nearly do as much damage as UAB. They had a couple methodical drives where they got down the field. They struggled early on. UAB was up 10-0 after the first quarter, and it probably should have been worse. But Miami got a nice drive to end the half, make it 10-6, and then in the second half, Miami really benefited from when UAB muffed a punt inside its own 10-yard line, and Miami scored on the next play. So turnovers were the equalizer in this one. UAB had 2 fumbles. One of them was in the fourth quarter where Miami could have scored more points and capitalized off that turnover, but the Redhawks failed to do so, and that allowed UAB to win this game. So a really thrilling Bahamas Bowl. Comes down to the final play. We've had a few good Bahamas Bowls before, most notably that first one ever, the 2014 matchup between Central Michigan and Western Kentucky that ended on a 34-0 run by Central Michigan in the fourth quarter, including a Hail Mary hook and ladder play where Titus Davis scored on the final play of regulation, but Central Michigan ran the fade route instead of scoring, and they missed the 2-point conversion. Speaking of fade routes, we're going to get into UTSA Troy next. So Troy defeated UTSA 18-12. I'm going to talk later on why the fade routes are important because I have some play call minor criticism in this game. But overall, this was a fun, low-scoring defensive game. I thought both bowl games were fun today, and not a single team scored more than 24 points. So you don't need a 48-45 game in order to have a fun bowl. I know we had some of them last year, like that Coastal Carolina NIU Cure Bowl, which was on the opening Friday evening of bowl season. That was a thriller. But Troy UTSA was a very eye-opening game. Right out of the gate, UTSA just looked like far superior team. And both of these teams entered this game on 10-game winning streaks. They both started 1-2. They had some quality losses. Both of them had a really close loss. UTSA lost to Houston in a multi-overtime game. I believe the score was 39-37 in week 1. Troy had lost to App State on the Hail Mary in week 3 when App State hosted game day. And then they both had a loss by more points to a team that is 8-4. One of them was Troy losing to Ole Miss 28-10. UTSA lost to Texas in a game that was probably closer than the scoreboard indicated, as a second half pick 6 really took UTSA out of the game after the Roadrunners led at halftime. So these teams had really similar trajectories going into the game, and they're both coming off conference championships. So this was one of the bowl matchups that was rated high on people's radar going into the contest. If you look at some of the major outlets that rank bowls, I know Tom Fornelli did it at CBS, I know Yahoo Sports did it, you will see this Cure Bowl between UTSA and Troy, the only bowl game between two conference champions, ranked pretty high on people's lists. And this game delivered. So as I was saying earlier, UTSA came out at looking like the far superior team. They rolled to a 12-0 lead. They had a safety, a touchdown, an extra point, and a field goal. They scored in every manner possible to establish a 12-0 lead. But penalties were the killer thing that brought Troy back into the game. UTSA was penalized 8 times for 89 yards, which is a lot more than Troy's 2 penalties that they had the entire game. And a penalty-laden drive allowed Troy to come back into this one and make it 12-7. And from there, it was just UTSA turning it over. If you look at the box score in this game, and you hide the turnovers, you look at the yards, offensive success in general, it looks like UTSA blew them out of the water. 345 to 169 total yards. UTSA outpassed them. They outran them. UTSA's offense did one thing wrong, and that was 5 things wrong, actually, was they turned the ball over 5 times, and you're not going to win many games doing that. Yeah, Troy threw a pair of interceptions as well, but 5 turnovers, and that doesn't even include 2 turnovers on downs on UTSA's final 2 drives of the game. So the offense moved the ball, but they just made critical mistake after critical mistake. They had 3 fumbles and 2 interceptions in this one. And Troy got a lot of yards off of interceptions in this game, where there was a stat earlier in the game where their interception yardage was higher than their total offensive yardage. And I think this was sometime in the third quarter. So Troy's defense had been the story all season. Troy had been carried by this unit throughout the year. You can look at some of their scores. They went 3-1 this year in the 4 games where they only scored 1 touchdown. They won games 10-6 over South Alabama, 10-9 over Army. 16 to 7 over Marshall. And then they lost 28 to 10 to Ole Miss in their other game where they scored just one touchdown. So Troy had been a defensive oriented team all year. I know they scored a ton of points on Coastal Carolina in the Sun Belt Championship game, but their identity had been their defense, and that's what showed today. Was they forced turnover after turnover on UTSA. They held Frank Harris to 23 of 42 passing, under 200 passing yards. Just a great job by everyone involved on this defense, especially the linebacking core. Carlton Marshall, he's the FBS active lead or tackles. He got 14 more tackles today. He was excellent from the outside linebacker position. KJ Robertson was another incredible playmaker. He had an interception in this game in addition to 9 tackles. And then the cornerback, Reddy Stewart, did such a good job on Zachary Franklin for UTSA. Zachary Franklin only had 1 reception, I believe, in the second half, and that was on the final drive of the game. Now, UTSA has one of the most stacked receiving cores I'd say in college football, definitely in the CUSA. Zachary Franklin, Joshua Cephas, and DeCorian Clark. But DeCorian Clark and Josh Cephas were unable to play in this game, so Zachary Franklin really had to carry the load out of the receivers, and Troy, I think, was able to defend the pass better without some of those other weapons in the lineup. So I mentioned earlier, UTSA was rather inefficient passing, but their run game did work for the most part with Kavorian Barnes leading the charge. Now, there was a play in the fourth quarter where Kavorian Barnes got UTSA's longest gain of the game. It was a 53-yard run. And then the very next play reminded me of Super Bowl 49 between the Patriots and Seahawks. The play before Russell Wilson throws that infamous interception to Malcolm Butler when targeting Ricardo Lockett. The play before, Marshawn Lynch brought I think it was a 1st and goal down to around the 2-yard line, maybe the 1-yard line. And that's exactly what Kavorian Barnes did after that 53-yard run, is he brought UTSA and positioned them on the 2-yard line. So you have a 2nd and goal at the 2. Your running back had been able to gain considerable yards. Now here's the play calling thing I was talking about earlier. It felt like another run to Barnes was necessary and was probably going to score a touchdown with the way he'd been moving previously. Instead, UTSA elects to pass on 3 plays. And one of those passes was perfect. It was a drop in the end zone, where if Chris Carpenter seals that in his hands, UTSA probably wins this game 19-18. But I want to talk about the other 2 plays, including the 4th down. They ran fades, just low percentage lobs into the end zone, and that was not UTSA's offensive style. I expected better play calling in situations like that from UTSA. If you planned on going for 4th down in that game, which I thought the field goal could have been a viable option considering Troy's offense wasn't explosive. You knew you were going to get more chances. You knew you were going to get a chance to tie the game probably if you kicked the field goal there and made it 18-15, you would have got another possession where you could have made it 18-18. So I probably would have kicked the field goal there, but I don't think going for it was that egregious of a decision. But if you're going to go for it, test the run game. Kavorian Barnes had 132 yards on 21 carries today. He did a great job against a pretty stout Troy defense with a good linebacking core, as I mentioned earlier. And UTSA's run game was what elevated their offense in this game. But they elected to pass 3 times. That didn't work. They had one more chance, and some of the plays were there, and they just didn't connect. Frank Harris had a deep post route to Zachary Franklin on the ending 4th down, and it was broken up. Pretty good pass, though, from Harris, and I'm really excited that Frank Harris gets to return next year because he has given us some incredible football over the years. He's made UTSA a really fun team to watch. Back-to-back conference champions. Now what's the next step for UTSA, and that's get their first bowl win. And with the Cincinnati, UCF, and Houston going to the Big 12 next year, that creates a pretty wide-open AAC where you'd have to think that UTSA with Frank Harris and a lot of returning talent, Rashad Wisdom at safety, you'd have to think that that UTSA team is going to be contenders for that New Year 6 spot in the final year under the current college football playoff format. They just fell short today, 18-12. They won't finish ranked, just like last year when they lost to San Diego State in the Frisco Bowl 38-24. They're not going to finish ranked, but Troy is, and this will be the first end-of-season ranking of Troy since becoming FBS. So definite credit to John Summerall, who transformed this program in year one at the helm, got them to 12-2, their most wins since joining the FBS. So what a day by the Troy Trojans, specifically their defense, who forced 5 turnovers and stopped UTSA on 2 critical fourth downs late in the game. So those were 2 fun bowl games to start our college football bowl season on Friday. I want to get a little into the Saturday games. Saturday morning, we kick off with an old Big East rivalry between the Louisville Cardinals and the Cincinnati Bearcats. Now, I'm excited for this game, but there's also things that could be better about this game. If you look at the opt-out list, the transfer portal list, it gets a little bit ugly where you're thinking, where's the skill position player production going to come from? But before I get into that, I just want to say it's great that they paired these two teams for several reasons. One of them, it's an old Big East rivalry of teams that were pretty good in the late 2000s, Cincinnati and Louisville. They made some BCS bowls and from 2006, 2008, 2009 between the two of them. So I think that renewing an old rivalry with a rivalry trophy, that's awesome. The Keg of Nails is a great idea. And then the Scott Satterfield hire happened, where Cincinnati poached Scott Satterfield from Louisville. But Louisville still ended up pretty well off by getting Jeff Brom from Purdue, who just won the Big Ten West. And that's a nice alma mater hire that Louisville fans have wanted for years. So it seems like the Cardinal faithful still finished well despite losing their head coach. So there's a Scott Satterfield situation. And then the Fenway Bowl, which has never been played before due to COVID cancellations the last 2 seasons. This is the first ever Fenway Bowl, and these two teams will share one sideline at Fenway Park in Boston. So I think that's another interesting aspect of this game. Now, what are the downsides of this matchup? As I mentioned earlier, where's the skill position player talent going to come from? Ben Bryant hurt his foot, out for the season for Cincinnati. The Bearcats had to play their final regular season game against Tulane without Ben Bryant. They lost to the Green Wave, and they lost a chance of making the AAC Conference Championship game. So Evan Prater is going to start. He's more of a run-oriented quarterback than Ben Bryant. Wasn't the most efficient passing game against Tulane for him, but I think with a start under his belt and a lot of bowl prep for this game, that we could see a better performance out of Prater going forward. And I think I'm really excited to watch him play against this Louisville defense tomorrow. Now, Louisville, their quarterback Malik Cunningham opted out of the remainder of the season. So we're going to get Brock Doman, who played significant time in the last 3 games. Also had that game against Boston College this year where he had to check in for an injured Cunningham and was unable to win the game. But he did beat Virginia the very next week. So that was a good redemption story by Brock Doman. So both of these backup quarterbacks are relatively experienced. So I think that should help going into this bowl game. Don't want to get too in-depth on this preview as I have some other games to touch. But if I had to make a prediction right now, I think I'm going to go with Louisville. I know that they're without 3 of their key running backs in Tyon Evans, Trevion Coley, and Jalen Mitchell in this game. They're without wide receiver Tyler Hudson. So skill position production is going to be hard to come by. But I do think that Brock Doman has produced enough experience where I think that Louisville can emerge past this shorthanded Cincinnati squad, which when you lose a coach like Luke Fickell, you're going to see guys go to the transfer portal, and that's the case for Cincinnati. Cincinnati, I think my biggest concern is where's the receiver production going to come from? Out of all wide receivers playing in this game, Will Pauling has the most catches and yards on the season with 11 catches and 112 yards. Their top 4 receivers are all transfer portal or opt-out, including Tyler Scott. So receiver production is going to be hard to find for Cincinnati, so I think the Bearcats will keep this pretty grounded. I think Louisville will have the more versatile offense and get the win. Next bowl game on the schedule on Saturday. Want to make sure that I'm getting these bowls correct in order. Would be, yes, it is the Las Vegas Bowl. Florida versus Oregon State in Allegiant Stadium. They now play this indoors. I do miss the days when the Las Vegas Bowl had color-on-color uniform matchups, like 2017 Boise State, Oregon, or 2018 was Fresno State versus Arizona State. We had some fun color-on-color uniform matchups, and I'd like to see another one here, especially with Florida and Oregon State. There'd be a lot of orange on the field, but I think the blue uniforms of Florida and the all-black look for Oregon State could really make an intriguing uniform matchup. What we know about Oregon State is Oregon State likes to run the ball, and they're pretty good at it. So they're going to keep this one pretty grounded. And I think Florida could do the same thing here, where Florida's going to play without Anthony Richardson, who opted out of this game. So it looks like Jack Miller III is going to start at quarterback for the Gators. So Oregon State's going to have a lot more experience on the offensive end because Florida had a lot of opt outs in this game. Damian Martinez is going to get a lot of rushing yards. He's gotten his throughout the season. End of the year really strong with a 6-game streak of 100-yard rushing games. I do like Oregon State in this game due to all of the Florida opt-outs, and Florida more limped to the finish than Oregon State, as the Beavers finished really strong to end the season with that incredible comeback against Oregon. Should have probably beat Washington on that Friday night game in November 4th, but ever since mid-October, I thought that Stanford comeback, I think the Beavers have been rolling, and Jonathan Smith has done a tremendous job as head coach with this program, bringing them to 9 wins in a national ranking. Moving down the schedule on Saturday, we have the Jimmy Kimmel LA Bowl between Washington State and Fresno State. This kind of takes place of the old Las Vegas Bowl with the Mountain West Pac-12 matchup in the ABC afternoon time slot. I think this is going to be a really fun one. I believe Pat McAfee will be on the call for this game, so that adds a little more excitement to this contest. Washington State Fresno State, I think, is one of the best bowl matchups. I love watching these quarterbacks. Cam Ward had an incredible season in his first season as an FBS quarterback for Washington State. We saw what he could do against Washington with 322 yards and 2 touchdowns in the Apple Cup. So did an incredible job from a passing standpoint there. We've seen him work a little bit with his legs too, as we saw later in the season in the Arizona game. I thought he did a good job of running, but overall, Cam Ward's just a dynamic quarterback. And I know he'll be operating without some of his receivers, like Stribling in this one, but still, I think that Cam Ward just has enough firepower where you can surround him with talent, and he's going to make things work. Now, Fresno State is a great story. This was a team that started 1-4. They had Jake Haener injured early in the year. It looked like a lost season, but Haener returned, and Fresno State has been incredible since his return. Haener has not thrown a single interception since October 29th, has a 5-game streak without one, and he helped Fresno State win the Mountain West, and the Bulldogs are winners of 8 straight now, sitting at a 9-4 record in this game. I am leaning toward Fresno State just because of how hot they have been with Haener at the helm at quarterback. But I do think that this one has a lot of shootout potential. Washington State star linebacker Diane Henley is going to sit out of this game, unfortunately. So Washington State will be without their star defender. But Fresno State, I think, looks really good right now. And I really want to see what Washington State's made of in this game. If you look at their 5 losses, they lost a lot of times respectably to the cream of the crop of the Pac-12. All 5 losses they had this year were to teams that had 9 wins or more. Their wins though, their best win I believe is 6-6 Wisconsin, and they beat 5-7 Arizona. So I'd like to see if they can defeat the Mountain West Conference champion. And off the top of my head, I don't think a Mountain West team beat a Pac-12 team this year. This was a down year for the Mountain West. They saw 3 of their teams lose to FCS competition by double digits, and the Mountain West desperately needs a win like this, I think, to conclude the season. So this is going to be an interesting Jimmy Kimmel LA Bowl at SoFi Stadium. A lot of quarterback firepower in this one. So if you're into high-scoring games, I believe we have an opportunity for that here. We have 3 more bowls to get to. Southern Miss versus Rice in the Lending Tree Bowl. This is Rice's first bowl game since 2014. The Owls have not gone bowling yet in the Mike Bloomgren era, and it's cool to see Rice back in bowl season, even though it comes with a 5-7 record. Rice, very well known for their academics, got chosen as the top 5-7 team due to a high academic progress rating than any other 5-7 squad. So Rice, they were 5-4 at one point this season. The wheels fell off at the end of the year. They suffered a 45-10 loss to Western Kentucky, a 41-7 loss to UTSA, and then they came a little closer in the finale against North Texas, losing 21-17. So Rice did deal with a lot of injuries late in the season, and that coincided with the most brutal stretch of conference play for the Owls, facing the top 3 teams in this USA to end the year. They'll be starting what was a few weeks ago their 4th-string quarterback, A.J. Padgett. He was their scout team quarterback going into the UTSA game. and he made his first career start against North Texas in the regular season finale. I thought he showed a lot of growth from when he first checked into that UTSA game until he played at the North Texas game. And now with a month of bowl prep, he can get it even better, and Rice's offense can get a little more dangerous, especially if they return wide receiver Luke McCaffrey, who also missed the last two games. Rice was never really a dominant passing offense the last few years, but I think that Brad Rosner and Luke McCaffrey make such an excellent receiving tandem where you do have to pay attention to Rice's receivers. I think the presence of those two receivers should help ease in the true freshman quarterback AJ Padgett as he makes his second career start, which will be Rice's first ESPN game I can remember in years. So he's going to be on the big stage pretty early on in his career with TJ McMahon sidelined due to an injury. Now for Southern Miss, Frank Gore Jr. is going to be the headliner of this game. And any college football fan who has watched Frank Gore Jr. play before loves watching Frank Gore Jr. play because his versatility is insane. He runs for touchdowns, he can catch touchdowns, and he can throw for touchdowns. He has 7 passing touchdowns in the last 2 seasons, and he is the best Wildcat running back in college football. It's not like he just goes in the game and just lobs it up and throws a random pass. No, he throws dimes, which is really impressive for a 5'8 running back. And not only can he throw, he's an incredible runner in himself, too. He had 199 rushing yards in the season finale to clinch bowl eligibility for Southern Miss. And he's a pretty good receiver, too, with 219 receiving yards on the year. So Frank Gore Jr. does it all. They'll have Trey Lowe at quarterback for this game. Southern Miss is more of a ground-oriented team, but they do have some weapons through the air, like Jason Brownlee as their star receiver. Southern Miss also has a very good safety tandem in Malik Shorts and Jay Stanley, which I would watch in this game. Rice, they have some firepower in the front seven, so I think that this could be a lower scoring game, even though I highlighted some of the explosive offensive talent. These two teams, they were conference rivals for a long time. They played every year from 2014 to 21. Southern Miss went to the Sun Belt this offseason, but they're going to play again in a bowl game. I don't think I said who I leaned on last game, but I think I'm going with Fresno State in the Jimmy Kimmel LA Bowl. And I'm going with Oregon State in the Las Vegas Bowl, if that was unclear. This one, so far, I'm leaning towards Southern Miss. Southern Miss is about a touchdown favorite in this game, so I'm going to go with the Golden Eagles over the Rice Owls, even though Rice has won the last 2 matchups in the series. Almost wrapping it up, we have SMU versus BYU in the New Mexico Bowl. This is a fun game. I've been out to this one before, and I think that New Mexico Bowl has great bowl hospitality, and it's a really good underrated vacation spot. And they have one of the coolest bowl trophies as they hand paint the trophy every year. I just think the New Mexico Bowl is a great experience, and I think these teams have probably had an excellent weeks there in Albuquerque. BYU, they're going without their quarterback, Jaron Hall, who suffered an injury late in the season, and he will not play in this game. I believe that means that Cade Fennegan is going to be the quarterback for this game. Fennegan hasn't taken a snap since 2020, back when he played with Boise State. So Fennegan is going to be the quarterback for this game, and he hasn't thrown a pass with BYU yet, so that's another interesting dynamic. It's kind of weird that we're talking about these teams' biggest games of the season and bowl season, and you're seeing these backup third-string, fourth-string quarterbacks coming out due to injuries, opt-outs, all sorts of reasons, transfer portal, all sorts of reasons. That's a bigger college football discussion for when this all should be allowed to happen at a later date. I do think college football needs a centralized governing body or a commissioner, but it's an interesting dynamic to look at this game. SMU has a more experienced quarterback in this game in Tanner Mordecai. Tanner Mordecai threw for 9 touchdowns in a game earlier this season when SMU beat Houston 77-63. However, he will be without Rashee Rice, his All-American wide receiver who had more than double the yardage of any other SMU receiver this year, had more than triple the receptions, had 96 catches on the year. So that just shows how important Rice was to the receiving core. Still, I think that SMU does have a lot of talent in their receiving core. You have guys like the tight end RJ Maryland has been pretty good. You have guys like Dylan Goffney, Moochie Dixon, that I think that SMU can still have respectable receiving core even without the presence of their All-American. So this game is going to be about SMU's offense. How well can they score against BYU? And can BYU get a passing game going with Finnegan at quarterback? Now, we've seen BYU's ability to run the ball before, and especially last year in that Independence Bowl with Tyler Algier running the ship. And this year, Christopher Brooks is going to be the main running back for this game. We've seen Chris Brooks have some breakout performances in the past this season, so BYU is going to need to rely on him big time for this game. Had 164 yards in the season finale against Stanford, so if he can continue that, the Cougars could be in good shape against SMU in New Mexico. This one, I'm actually leaning in the direction of BYU. I think BYU is the more physical team defensively. I think operating without Rashee Rice, even though SMU does have a lot of viable receivers, I think that that's going to be a tough blow for SMU's offense in this one. And SMU really hasn't established as consistent of a running game as BYU. I think that BYU's rushing offense is going to take the Cougars to victory in this one, but it should be close in New Mexico. Final bowl game, I'm actually going to be at this one on Saturday, and that is the Frisco Bowl between North Texas and Boise State at Toyota Stadium in Frisco, Texas, a suburb outside of Dallas. Boise State enters this game coming off a Mountain West championship loss, while North Texas enters this game coming off a CUSA championship game loss. North Texas fired Seth Luttrell after the CUSA title game, so Phil Bennett, the defensive coordinator, is going to take interim coaching duties for this game only. So Phil Bennett is going to coach this game for North Texas, and he has some weapons on his defense. KD Davis, who is a star linebacker, a multi-time first-team All-CUSA selection, had 14 tackles, an incredible game in the CUSA title game, had a 19-tackle game earlier this year. So they're going to need him to step up big to stop Boise State's offense, excuse me. I think that North Texas has a stronger offense in this game, and Boise State has a stronger defense. Boise State did a really good job of limiting teams from scoring a lot late in the season, but the Broncos' offense did leave some to be desired at times. But they got a lot better after firing their offensive coordinator earlier in the season and getting Dirk Ketter, the former Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coach, and Ketter's son plays on the team. So that's an interesting dynamic there. But I think that North Texas, they're led by 29-year-old quarterback Austin Aune, who's going to go to the NFL after playing this game. Aune is a pretty good passer. North Texas has a versatile offense where they have pretty high ranks in both the passing and run game. Run game is where they thrive the most. They just bring out a stable of running backs, and they're going to try to run it down Boise State's throat. However, Boise State does counter with a pretty good defense. They have some all-Mountain West talent on there, including strong safety J.L. Skinner, who should be playing on Sundays in the future. Just an all-around standout strong safety. He had 4 interceptions, 5 pass breakdowns on the year, and he was an incredible tackler. You can find him all over the field in this one. Have some good linebackers too. Ezekiel Noah's one of them that's going to try to stop this North Texas run game. I think that even though this is a double-digit spread, I think this one is going to be a close game. I think that North Texas is a little slept on due to their sheer offensive firepower that they have capable. So I'm going to say Boise State wins this one in a close one to wrap up bowl season on Saturday night. Already gone for 33 and a half minutes. And that will be all the time that we have for bowl previews and the bowl recaps today. I'm going to try to churn out more of these in bowl season. If you enjoyed this video and analysis, leave a comment, let me know. And if people start watching these, I'm going to try to put more effort into them, start making graphics and all of that. So if you found this video somehow, tell me how you found it too, because I'm just turning out these live videos. These are all in one recording. And I'm going to just keep trying to do these throughout bowl season because it's my favorite time of college football season, and there's a lot of intriguing matchups, and it slows down a bit so I can break down each of these matchups in more detail than I could for regular season. So hope you enjoyed, and have a great bowl season and great